Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, we are going to go over the most impressive runs of attendance in MLB history. Not the longest sellout streaks, but the most impressive periods where teams just sold so many tickets. It just seems unfathomable by today's standard of attendance in baseball. There were conditions that would have suggested that none of these streaks would have happened, but somehow they did do it. And they did it for an extended period of time at numbers that just aren't usually seen today. So without further ado, we'll go over 5 teams here and let's get started. So first off, we have the Baltimore Orioles. From 1992 to 2001, they averaged 3,371,436 fans a season and 43,573 per game. They were number 1 in the American League for 4 straight seasons during this time, and they only made the playoffs twice during this 10-season period. Now, they never had a massive sellout streak because the ballpark did hold 48,000, but the lack thereof winning in that first decade at the ballpark was not enough to deter people from coming. But what really did bring people to the ballpark was the ballpark itself and not necessarily the team, because it was revolutionary. It was the first stadium in a very long time that was both new and good, because before that, you had a ton of crappy cookie-cutter style stadiums, multi-purpose, that just never worked well, and all the classic ballparks like Wrigley Field and Fenway, yeah, they had charm, but they were old and not renovated at that time. And Baltimore had lost over 20% of its population in the decades leading up to the opening of Camden Yards, but it didn't matter. But in the end, even though they didn't win a World Series during this period, they still had a hell of a run. Next, we have what might be the most impressive of all of them on this list, and that is the Colorado Rockies from 1993 to 2001. During this period, they sold 3,630,807 tickets per season, and per game, they sold 47,291. The team only made the playoffs once during this 9-season period, and they led the NL their first 7 years of existence as a franchise. And despite being an expansion franchise that was not even going to be playing in a brand new ballpark their first year, they broke the single-season attendance record all time in MLB history. They played their first season at Mile High Stadium and averaged over 55,000 fans a game. And usually, the second season of an expansion franchise, there's a significant drop in attendance in the second season. You can see here that the Rays, Marlins, and Diamondbacks all had significant drops in attendance after their inaugural season. The Colorado Rockies improved in their attendance their second season. The attendance numbers were so impressive that during the construction of Coors Field, they decided to make the ballpark bigger, expanding the capacity from 43,000 to 50,000. And while they were at Mile High Stadium, there were 21 times where they drew over 70,000. And this was coming off a period where Denver had lost nearly 10% of its population. And it was already smaller to begin with. It was much smaller back then, and it was not the growth hub that we see today. And even despite having a 50,000-seat ballpark at Coors Field, they still had 203 straight sellouts during this period. So this was just one of those rare occasions where an expansion franchise really just hit it out of the park. MLB hit it out of the park with having a team there, putting a team there, and it just really worked out. And the team still draws pretty well, despite the team not being very good the last 15 years. Next, we have the Cleveland Indians at Jacobs Field. From 1994 to 2001, they averaged 3,141,049 fans per season and 41,263 per game. This one is really impressive just considering that not even 10 years before this period began, the Indians were drawing less than 10,000 fans a game at Municipal Stadium. Granted, it was a piece of crap, but it wasn't like that was 50 years before. And Cleveland had lost around 40% of its population in the 60 years leading up to this stadium opening. Cleveland's population had been declining a long time, but this just worked. And it was just like everything went right at the same time. The team won a lot. But The stadium didn't even sell out every game the first year that it opened. The 455 games that they sold out in a row, which was in a roughly 43,000 seat ballpark, didn't even begin until the second year of the stadium's existence. But what's even more impressive, and I doubt has ever happened, is that every single game for the season was sold out before the season began 5 years in a row. You know, you just had a new ballpark that hardly anybody else had at the time it opened, and you had an entertaining team. You had power hitters, Albert Bell, Manny Ramirez, Jim Thome. The team was just entertaining, and it's like everything went right at the same time. And even though the Browns were gone for a part of this period in time, the sellout streak began before the Browns left and ended nearly 2 years after they came back. The Indians were literally selling out games while Browns games were going on across the city. And the Indians' attendance would drop so much, not that far distant from when this happened, that it just makes it even more hard to believe that it ever actually did happen. And lastly, we have one that is a little bit more closer to the present, and that is the San Francisco Giants from 2010 to 2018. They averaged 3,304,543 during those 9 seasons and averaged 40,740 per game. Now, was the team good during these seasons? Absolutely. They won 3 World Series during this 9-season period, but they only made the playoffs 4 times. And when this period of attendance began, the ballpark was not new. It was already 10 years old. But despite this, they sold out 530 straight games, the second most in MLB history. And it's not like the team was always popular. During periods of the 90s, they averaged below 2 million fans and were not that popular at the gate. So, combination of an immaculate ballpark, even though it wasn't brand new, and the team winning a lot really went a long way here. But what you also have to consider is during the 2010s, there was a lot more technology. There were smartphones. You know, the things that people say why people don't go to baseball games existed during this time. It wasn't like the 90s where there was less things technologically to do and distract people. Yet this team was still filling the ballpark like the other teams on this list were. And before everybody complains in the comments and says, why didn't I include Boston on this list? That's because Boston's sellout streak, which some people question how long it actually was because there's debate as to whether they faked some of their sellouts at the end at least, was done with a lot smaller of a ballpark. The sellout streak started off with around 35,000 considering being a sold out game. Those are decent numbers, but they don't quite match up to the numbers that these other teams had on the list. And most of these other teams are not the mega market that Boston is, except for maybe San Francisco. But also Boston pretty much always had one of the highest payrolls in baseball. So they had super high payroll in a mega market. So it's not really a big surprise or a major accomplishment if you're going to have the highest payroll in an already huge city, which the team is already followed by, 5, 6 states, New England. So, it's somewhat impressive, but not quite what these other ones were. So those are the 5, some pretty impressive periods of attendance. Let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching.